You might already know this about me if you've watched any of my other videos, but I love sketchbooks. So without further ado, I invite you to get a nice cup of tea or a comforting drink of your choice. I'm going to place mine away from the Gouache Sketchbook and get ready to join me on this cozy journey. I would have recorded this much sooner. However, I have been sick for over a week, so I've been exhausted, still getting over it. Please forgive my voice and perhaps a bit of low energy today. Today's going to be a mellow day. I am just overwhelmed. First, let me say thank you. Thank you so much to everybody who took the time to watch my first sketchbook tour, and especially to anybody that left a comment. Everything was so wonderful. It was such an encouraging experience, especially being my first sketchbook tour. I was so nervous. And this year has been very challenging. This has been a very difficult year in my personal life. And throughout that, I have been painting the whole time, and it has been my sketchbooks have become even more so a safe place that is always, they're always there for you. You can always open a sketchbook and start creating something, and it starts to feel like home. Even though each one is like part of myself, but they're all different because I see myself growing as I move through these different experiences. And if you don't have a sketchbook practice, I cannot recommend it enough. It is so deeply meaningful, especially if you're going through something difficult and you need something that feels like yours, that feels grounding, and it feels like your own. Okay, without further ado, keep calm and hike on. So this sketchbook, I'll skip the first few pages. There's some swatching, some limited palettes. This sketchbook, I started with the goal of using it for Plein Airpril last year. And I'm happy to say, I'm going to cover up this side for now. I'm happy to say I did complete that goal. I painted every single day of Plein Airpril in forest preserves and local nature settings all around the Chicagoland suburbs. And thankfully there are a lot of forest preserves to choose from, a lot of beautiful views. And I painted rain or shine. And it was it was not the sunniest month. There were a lot of rainy and cloudy and gray days. There was a day where it snowed and then rained. You can see the reflections I painted on the piers here. So what I'm doing, why I'm covering this side is because this is work I did much later. This is from a couple months ago, and it's September 25. So I started the sketchbook a long time ago, and what happened was I started doing plein air in this sketchbook, and then in my other gouache sketchbook, I started doing a lot more studio work from photos. So I got more invested in this one, and once Plein Airpril finished, this one, I kind of was waiting to finish the other one before I came back to this one, I guess. Okay, so you can see it rained that day. There's raindrops on the page because I had to go out and get out of my car and try to get a decent picture of the painting next to the landscape, and it didn't go that well. It was a lot of cold gray weather. Here I tried to use this flat brush. It's hard to find flat brushes for travel sets, and I was trying to do everything with one brush, and this brush does not work well for what I wanted for the tree and branch shapes. It's too soft. So what I've been doing recently, tangent, is I actually have a travel brush set by Etcher, and these are nice, but they're still pretty soft. So lately my favorite travel brushes that are flat brushes are actually Princeton, really basic Princeton wash brushes, 1/2 inch and 1/4 inch. Those are probably my favorite. I've tried a lot. Like I have, not to get too into the travel supplies here, but this is a Da Vinci Casaneo flat brush. It's great for bigger washes. It's very soft. I prefer it for watercolor. So lessons I learned Plein Airpril last year is I do not like the soft flat brushes so much. I really like flat brushes, but not the soft ones for gouache. This is another one that I was not super happy with. And if you watch my other sketchbook tour, you'll see I did a few redemptions. Like, I keep bumping the camera with my head. I did a few redemptions. I took a picture of the place because it was freezing that day. My fingers were like falling off within 20 minutes. I didn't get the opacity I wanted on these lines. I should use a brush instead of my finger. I didn't get the opacity I wanted on these lines, so I had to redo it. I went home and redid it with wet gouache in the studio, and noticing the differences between the in-person scale and colors that I use, also techniques with the dry gouache versus the wet gouache in the studio. I haven't explained in another bit. I do have my travel palettes. This is what I was using for Plein Airpril for all the gouache pieces. And it was just an interesting experience to get inspired in person and then come back and refine it in the studio. So I started doing that quite a bit. There's a full page spread, not quite, almost a full page, but I was exploring with the longer format. These colors don't really inspire me. At this point in spring, I'm just waiting for green things to grow again, but I really like that tree. I had better luck with the gouache with this, even though it's soft, this travel silver black velvet, this travel brush that's lost all markings at this point. But this one works much better for the tree branches and delicate shapes than the flat brush. This was a day in Chicago, again, very windy and gray. Did a little seagull. I again did another piece in my other sketchbook, so I'll link that sketchbook tour if you want to see all of those pieces. This was the day of the solar eclipse. I couldn't get a great picture with my phone, so I just did a little painting of the eclipse kind of as a joke, and a table in the park with the shadow directly beneath it because it was around noon, and found a couple other trees that I liked. I really like, this is the plein air version of this tree, and the photo had way more detail. I didn't have a lot of time there, so I really spent a lot of time getting the details of the bark and the texture of the bark here. I really enjoy how this piece turned out. I got some dry brush texture and the highlights. I really like that one. So sometimes the plein air piece inspires a much longer piece. This is another Plein Airpril day at a bridge. I was mostly interested in the water reflections of the sky. This one took a while. See, I'm getting braver with the bigger spreads. I even like leaving some of the gray of the paper untouched. Trying to push my boundaries and experiment and grow. You can see this is a later piece, and this is also, my colors are getting a lot more vibrant. So I wanted to discuss that a little bit. What's happening with my colors? I was going to say, you know, now that I'm getting more vibrant, that I don't love my muted palettes, but the more I was looking at these while I was thinking about the sketchbook tour, I was like, you know, these are actually really soft and subtle, and I'm not going to say boring. They're muted. They are less saturated, so maybe they're more calming. And again, things still weren't that bright. There was a lot of foggy days, so I think I was influenced by the weather. But overall, my palette is trending brighter these days. I did that little spot recently, and you can tell that's just way more vibrant, way more pushing contrast, value contrast, color contrast. So I like both. You know, this is it just shows how much things can change over time. Okay. This was another rainy day, painting leafless trees, waiting for leaves and green things in my car, and enjoying this, actually enjoying the shapes of the bare branches. It was a fun study. I much prefer the version, I did these. I keep bumping the camera, sorry. I much prefer these. I like the circular format better. I like how I was breaking the plane a little bit. I don't know. Just loose silhouette ideas. Okay. This was one day of Plein Airpril. Same lake, almost the same view. I think I turned a little bit, but it was starting off sunny. There was light reflecting off the water. And then just a few minutes later, like while I was working on this painting, you can see the gray creeping in, the clouds creeping in, and I had to do another sketch like in the next 15-20 minutes because the whole landscape had changed, all the colors had changed. Plein air is a challenge. And what I was doing with these, this is actually my viewfinder that I will use to frame things in plein air because it's hard to figure out where your boundaries are sometimes when the landscape seems so vast. But also it works to just trace and make little cute squares. So that's what I was doing with that. And this was another day. I found a little stream and I sat down next to the stream and painted the rocks in the stream. This is one of my favorite plein air pieces that I have ever done, I think. This was along the Fox River in Illinois. And I really love the blue shadows. I, again, have another piece in my other sketchbook, but I'm not going to show it right now. I think I like this one better than the studio version, which is rare, but it does happen. Here are more plein air pieces. I think this was this dreaded brush that I was getting really sick of, and this was a really weird day with the weather. Like it started off nice, and then it was stormy, and then it cleared up, and then it got stormy again, then it got cleared up and stormy. Within a matter of like an hour, I think I gave up because I kept trying to paint something and everything changed so drastically, so quickly that I'm really dissatisfied with these two paintings. And then I was like, oh, the light came out again. Same day. You can see the storm clouds in the back, but these trees were weird. The light was really fascinating, actually. These trees were very illuminated and almost like glowing on the leaves with this like eerie dark background. And I feel like that one I captured okay. The weather is definitely a challenge in plein air. I try to work quicker. That's also a challenge for me, working quickly. Plein air encourages that. I think this was another car painting. I remember I had frayed this brush. I hadn't put the cap on back properly, and it was like had hairs sticking out to the side, and I was like, oh no, what am I gonna do? But actually it gave me an opportunity to do a lot of fine lines and detail work. So I had traced my phone for this one, and then I'm breaking the format, kind of experimenting with framing and going outside the boundary. And this is just some logs. I remember it was a very windy day, so again, I had to paint in my car because my pages kept flowing in the wind. And at that point, I don't think I had brought clips with me all the time. So just something to consider. The weather's always, always changing. And this was a pretty quick one, actually. It was a cool view, but I don't feel like the perspective really showed as well. I was on the way to go to a movie, I remember this day. So I gave myself like 20 minutes. I was like, it's going to be a fast painting. It's funny, the memories that these recall. I was like, oh yeah, I know I went to see a movie this day. Sketchbooks are funny like that. This was a fun day. Well, if you have a phone, you can turn it sideways. But this was a fun day. I'll kind of pan so you can see. Maybe I'll do this for a little bit. This was a fun one. This was at Starved Rock. That was maybe my favorite place to paint last year. Waterfalls. There's not a lot of waterfalls in Illinois, but at Starved Rock at the right time of year, there are quite a few. Actually, I just went back there a few weeks ago. I have so many more sketchbooks to show. That's from Scotland. I also went to Scotland recently. And here, I did a couple. These were much quicker. These were in watercolor. There's Scotland again. These were in watercolor, but these were Starved Rock. Different waterfalls, but more recent, smaller watercolor plein air sketchbook. Have to tour that one eventually someday. I have so many more sketchbooks to tour. Would you like more sketchbook tours? Let me know. But I really like the light shining through on the trees and illuminating the rocks. It was, again, big, the full page spread. I'm getting more adventurous here. I keep doing that more in this sketchbook and I'm really proud of it, but it is a challenge with the dry gouache. So I was like loving the full page spread, but also getting frustrated that of how much I had to mix the same color over and over and spray and re-wet and try to recreate the color, because it just would be a different experience if I was using wet gouache, but I didn't quite have a setup for that at the time. And now I do, so I can explore that more. That's upside down. More Plein Airpril. A lot of this brush. I'm really liking the delicate trees and branches. Again, very muted palettes, but it was also the weather. It was also the time of year. Here's where it's finally starting to get green again. The flowers are blooming. I've never been so interested in blossoming, flowering trees in my life until last year. And then I was just noticing them all of a sudden everywhere. So it's interesting that plein air can just change what you're looking at, change what you notice, change what you see and appreciate. I'm not even that into flowers. Like I very much am into painting trees. And this just made me really happy. The pinks and the blossoming and you could just feel the renewal of spring happening. That makes me happy. Okay, this one I don't love. I was trying for depth in the forest and layers in the colors of the trees, and this was one of the first days where it was like really sunny, and I just walked straight into a forest and it was very green, and I just sat myself down with my little tripod stool, like surrounded by this bright neon green, feeling so happy about it. And I should go back to this. I should go back to this view. I don't consider this one a super success. Again, it's because of the mixing. It's because it takes so much effort to like, I mean, you can soak these really well with a spray bottle before you start. That helps, but then you only get so far down before it's dry again. And it can get frustrating. So that's the point I was at using this, especially on toned paper like gray or tan paper, which I really do enjoy for gouache because it lets you see and notice the opacity more. Getting a bright green yellow on this paper takes layers and a lot of effort. So it was the subject matter. It was a good experiment. It taught me a lot of things. And here you can see, well, actually, this is from July. This is from August, so we'll keep going. I must have skipped a couple pages by accident. So this is another plein air piece. You can see the trees are blooming. That was a very rainy day. I didn't even bother with the background. Did not get out of the car. And then I think this was the last plein air piece I did in Plein Airpril for 2024. And then this sketchbook kind of sat on the side for a while I did other things. I worked on bigger pieces. I worked on other projects. I worked on making prints and opening a shop, and then finishing my other gouache sketchbook that was very much my studio sketchbook at that point. Thinking I would use this for plein air more, and then realizing that I kind of shifted my plein air interests to smaller sketchbooks, and I'll talk about that later. But because the format, well, we'll go backwards a little bit. So this is July of last year, and I had So this is July of last year, and I had, you can see I did a full page spread. I really like the full page spread. I really love this tree reflection and the shadows. So I really like this one, but I was increasingly frustrated with larger paintings with dry gouache. This one, I remember I was babysitting my niece, and I had brought my Neocolors, which are a disaster, but I brought my paints because she's an art girl herself. I love to encourage her painting. And this was a view from outside their house, the reflections on the lake. I was spending time with young children, so I was like, I'm just gonna be loose and have fun with it. I don't think it was even quite finished because my niece wanted to go play in the nature some more, and she lost interest with painting. And she usually will paint for a long time, but I had fun with the Neocolors. I don't use them as much. I'm trying to use them more. I hear a lawnmower. Hopefully that's not too distracting. So this was just a fun experimental one with Neocolors and scribbles. Okay, and then this kind of sat on the side until this year. So I think we'll start around here because I had accidentally skipped a few pages and then not dated a couple of pages, and I'm not quite sure where this got reinvigorated, but it's around here. So we'll put one of these here as a placeholder to come back. And this is, I was planning This was around April or early May of this year. This might have been the first one that I started in this sketchbook again, just to do a value study of a dead tree. I really liked the shapes and the shadows, and working in monochrome really helps you see the values and focus down on the values more. These are some trees in my neighborhood. You can see it was still early in the year. It still had some orange from the winter showing. I emphasized that. And dead tree in the water, rocks in the water with the reflections. Again, finally dated something, so April 11th of this year. Local orchid greenhouse, which is a fun place to visit when it's cold in winter and you just want to feel like you're in tropical weather. Go to a greenhouse. They're fantastic and inspiring. I don't know what that plan is, but it had really cool shapes and that was fun. This is me getting very loose and expressive and exploring different borders or breaking borders, pushing past borders and, you know, not having borders at all. You know, I'm playing with format in this book a lot. And this was a plein air one. Again, at local forest preserve. And see, the trees are still dead. No, there's not a lot of leaves happening yet. Again, it's a pretty chilly day, but here I am playing with the format again, trying to be loose and expressive. Sorry, the lawnmower is loud. It was a challenge to mix so much of the same color from a dry palette. I'm gonna stop saying that. But that's what pushed me away from using this sketchbook for plein air, because I was tempted to fill the whole page so much. This is another orchid from the greenhouse, growing on a little log with moss. I just found these adorable. This was a really quick sketch of a sequoia. I was trying to paint faster with big flat brushes and loose gesture, so I think I timed myself and gave myself 20 minutes. Does not feel finished. Always trying to paint faster. These were more slower, in-depth pieces of the orchids. I really found this just to be delicate textured, and I don't know. I just thought that's gorgeous. It's so pretty. I would take these home and just hang them up on my wall if I had more space. And I was getting more into plein air because I was preparing for a trip. First art retreat I've ever been on in France in May, which is actually where I got these colors and what I was swatching out here. But I was practicing more plein air, getting ready for France, and I'll link that video description as well. Also, I'm not very into red, but I have this Tuscan red or Indian red that tends to find its way into my palette. Where did that pencil go? I've used that pencil a lot in this sketchbook recently, so you'll see that red there. Houseplant, this is this tree, but from the other side. So this was plein air, and then this was from a photo when I got home. And I much prefer this one. I think it's a much more interesting piece. I really like the highlights and shadows on the tree. Here's a view from Lake Michigan. This is nearby in the same area. This is a tree from near the border in Wisconsin. And you can see that Tuscan red pencil coming through. I also have outlined more pieces recently, trying to differentiate it from the pieces that were from so long ago. And this one, I have painted these trees multiple times. I did paint these trees at this forest preserve like a couple of years ago in a totally different sketchbook, and maybe I'll show you that one at some point. But these trees have captured my attention. I did not like this version. I like the plein air. I wanted a longer format. I wanted to zoom in, and I just really love the light popping through these trees and how the shapes are kind of getting abstracted. And see, sometimes I don't paint trees. Not sure where that pencil went. Excuse me, I need some tea. Here it is. Almost got nervous. So this is just an old Prismacolor pencil. Oh, Tuscan red, close to Indian red. Very, big fan of both of those earthy reds lately, and I just started using this to write in the sketchbook. See, I didn't have a lot of writing in the other one. I'm pushing boundaries here. These trees, I really hope the lawnmower isn't too loud. Maybe I should pause. I'm gonna pause. So in May, I also went to Switzerland as well as France, and this is from a photo of the little alpine village that I got to stay in for a few days. It was gorgeous, and this was in the studio with my wet gouache. I really enjoyed the full page spreads, actually. This one got quite detailed. There's those trees again, not the real trees, but like fantasy trees. More stylized, like imagined trees inspired by these guys. These are from pictures from Switzerland. It was so mossy there. It was surprisingly very mossy. There was a lovely river with like snow melt. These are the same trees as these, but with a different palette. I could talk about my color choices here, but let's say this is more of a limited palette, and this is convenience greens. So I'm gonna write that. So this is about, oh, it's right there. I can do that. So the Holbein, yeah, he's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pre-mixed greens that I haven't chosen specifically, like they came in sets, but my Winsor Newton palettes, sorry, my Winsor Newton and Daniel Smith gouache container is more individual colors that I've built up over time. I tend to use this more, honestly. Too much to talk about. Okay, so this one was convenience greens from the Holbein set, and I think this was also the Holbein set, and this one was a limited palette from the Winsor Newton. Maybe that was also from the Holbein set. Anyway, it was a limited palette. That's the point. Too much to talk about. Here's another limited palette, mixed greens. That was from the train in Switzerland. This was a river, mountain melt-off waterfall in Switzerland. And then this was just a tree silhouette. I forget the picture I used. But I was experimenting with watercolor graphite, actually. Very interesting. And the Kiritake Ganze Tambai, which is kind of gouache, kind of watercolor. It's got white, it's opaque. So this is me going outside the gouache adventure. This is mixed media. Being adventurous in this book. So trying to keep stretching and do different things. It's some swans. I did not quite finish. These were amazing trees on this island in Door County called Rock Island, and they were covered in lichen, and the forest floor was so bright red. This is like this perfect Venetian red I think I used under there. And then I have some lily pads getting really bright there. My greens, my neon greens are popping. The background there, and the neon green in the light. And then this was practice for a bigger piece I did for the Fantasy Forest July 2025 challenge by Lyndon Shields on Instagram, and the prompt was Fairy Door. And I had just been to France and Switzerland, and I was so obsessed with the pastel blue color that is common to the south of France. So I was thinking all about these towers with these cone-shaped roofs and the sycamore trees. So I kind of combined all of that all of those memory experiences into one piece. And I've never painted a fairy door before. I had to cover it with moss, of course. And I really like how that turned out. I actually used different colors than I did in the final piece, but to test out like the shadows and the lighting. It's funny, sometimes I'm just like, I'm gonna use a different palette, like at the last minute after however long that took me. But I like both versions. There's some lily pads. This I consider a dismal fail. I didn't even finish. I was trying to do lichen up close. This is another idea for ancient lichen. I have sketches, like pencil sketches in a different sketchbook. I have lots of scribbles of ideas for these prompts. And I got this far on this one. I was going to cover this in lichen, like red and orange and yellow. And then I was like, wait, it's fantasy forest. And I like, maybe there's trees around these castles, but it doesn't feel foresty enough. So I scrapped the idea and did something else. Here's a couple more ideas that I didn't quite finish. This one was for tree sanctuary. So I knew I wanted like a glowing tree. This is a bald cypress tree. I've never actually seen any in person, so I was working from references. And then this is a sequoia tree that like had a hole in it and fairy lights coming from inside. Okay. This is a tomato. This is me trying to paint red. It was not a moldy tomato. It was an heirloom tomato that was like beautifully red to orange to yellow to green. And I just struggle with my reds, with mixing and shading reds, like because I paint so often the opposite end of the color wheel. I don't like just red. I don't know. It's hard. Gotta practice it more. This was a flower I saw in France. I don't even know the name of, but it was illuminated at night outside a building. And I just loved the shadows. I don't know if you can tell it's a flower. I just thought it looked kind of cool and abstract like this. Okay, this is another local forest preserve. I was using one big fat brush, trying to simplify my shapes. If you want to paint faster and focus on bigger shapes, try using 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch size flat brush. I wouldn't go with the whole inch. That's a bit, you wouldn't get a lot of detail out of that. That would be frustrating. That's a 3/4 inch actually. That's not even a full inch. I would go with like a 1/2 inch as long as it's got like stiff bristles and you can get detail out of it. Or you know, it doesn't have to be long bristles or short bristles, but a flat brush, especially with gouache, gives you nice shapes and it applies paint very evenly. So you get consistent layering compared to a round brush. This is one of my favorite flat brushes too. This one's softer. I kind of prefer the firmer ones now, but I like the flat brushes lately. Okay, so this is a windmill I saw in France. This is a local forest reserve. This was a trip to the Indiana Dunes National Park I took last month, just a month ago, with some friends. And there's so much more to paint from. I have so many more pictures to paint from. I need to paint for like days and days and days. I've been sick for over a week and I'm recovering, so send happy thoughts. Anyway, I started swatching my colors on the side here like that. I don't know how long that lasted. This was a watercolor palette that I swatched way before I did this. Just kind of curious to see how it would go on this paper. That's a very opaque color. You can see a lot of these are more transparent, but I don't know, I think this paper doesn't like too much water, but I think if they were used thicker, you could do something interesting with watercolor. This page and a few other pages, now that we'll go backwards, this was my last page in the sketchbook, and then I found a couple other pages and I filled in those spots too. But for all intents and purposes, this is the last page in the sketchbook. I just went to Scotland and had an incredible time. It was a whirlwind adventure. I was not planning this trip very long ahead of time. A friend invited me to come on an art retreat, and then we met up with another artist and painted our hearts out, and it was fun. Took the train. It was amazing. And when we met up with my friend Sarah, at a waterfall, there were these birches, there were these ancient mossy birches that like would not get out of my head for days. And I want to paint a bigger version of this. This will probably be a study. Again, I'm liking I'm really liking the full page spreads like this for studies for larger pieces. I love the patterning and the light on the moss. It's kind of unfinished. I kind of like the unfinished bits, trying to balance that out. And I did this orange India ink underpainting on this one. I have a hard time leaving underpaintings visible. Like, it was a challenge to let it show through and not cover it all up, but I think I did decent here. You get like little specks in the tree that are orange. Just give it a little vibrancy. I'll lift it up just for this. Like little specks of orange. The India ink is waterproof, which means it won't come up. Like if you used orange gouache, it would mix with the other layers, but India ink doesn't once it's dry. And also it makes the page kind of waterproof. So it's almost like you did like an acrylic gesso surface first. Not quite, but I think depending on how much you watered down the India ink, like it's kind of waterproof. So it's like the gouache sits on it differently than it does sit on the paper on its own. So, okay. So let's go back. And then here we go. This was a tree outside the retreat venue that I stayed at in France that I just kept noticing and took a picture of and had to commemorate. I like the shadows. I think it is a cypress or a cypress, maybe. I think. Okay. It's funny that I feel like my palette got so much brighter this year compared to last year, but this one feels really delicate. I've got the pastel blue. I feel like these pair well somehow. Like the spots, like they seem like they belong together. I don't know, on the same page. But this one I really love. This was like a little vase on a stone platform in front of a winery that we toured in France, just with some, greenery growing out of it. And I loved the way the vase was highlighted. I was just interested in the light and shadow and the moss, of course. The moss. That was another piece I did from Switzerland. This is actually, where should I put it? Put it here. This is a castle in Poland, a royal castle in Poland. I needed something, you can see I did the orange underpainting here, but I needed something that fit this weird L shape because I only did this spot and I didn't want to leave this much of the page blank, and I was determined to find a picture that fit as well as possible. And after visiting Europe a couple times, I am obsessed with old castles and crumbly old stones and cobblestones. So I figured it had to be a castle, and I went to Poland a year ago, in September of 24 actually, so just a year ago, and I knew this seemed like the picture that fit the space the best, and I really like how it turned out. I tried to leave it much looser, more experimental, with the orange showing through, unfinished in a lot of places. Like, look at the stairs. Quite proud of that actually. I like how unfinished that is. It's messy. Part of me wants to be like, it's not perfect, but from a distance, it's got that painterly look to it. The sought out painterly look. This is from a local forest preserve area with a little waterfall and a bridge. I did a plein air version that I did not love, and then I did this version. I really adore it. Just the light, how the light is bouncing across in the shadow of the tree. And then this was from a train ride in Scotland. I have so many more pictures and videos of endless train ride landscapes. I highly recommend taking the train through a beautiful country if you get the chance. You will see so much that way. And paint on the train if you're lucky. So again, this is a great contrast. This is why I'm covering up one page at a time. Last year, stormy plein air. this year from photos. Sense that I'm just naturally bumping up the vibrancy on things. I'm doing these fun backgrounds. I had to paint a cow because the cows in Switzerland were so cute. I need to paint some Scottish cows actually in my new sketchbook. And I wrote, "Thank you for Swiss cheese." They all had these bells. You could hear them throughout the valley. It was amazing. I think this is a picture from last fall. Not a lot of stuff growing dead leaves. I like the contrast, the red ground with the mossy tree. This is a picture a friend sent me from Canada, and I have not finished it. Sadly, did not finish that one. Maybe I will finish it after this sketchbook tour. Sometimes I go back and finish things much, much later. Okay, another forest preserve. This is actually a bog. So I'm standing on a sort of pier that's floating on the water. Yep. This was another one from Forest Preserve. There's lily pads and the light sparkling on the water. We're experimenting with bigger shapes of trees instead of focusing on the details. And I think that's it. Oh no, okay. It's another one from this year. I'm getting very into my shadows and highlights. Strong shadows, strong highlights. Voiceover Kristen here. I actually will be doing a tree tutorial. That's going to be my next YouTube video. But which of these two trees do you prefer? Do you prefer the deciduous one or the pine trees? Let me know in the comments. Strong shadows and highlights. I'm tired. I'm sick. Okay. So that's it for that sketchbook. I tried some new things, orange underpaintings, architecture, red tomatoes, birds, but it's mostly trees because it's me. So lots of trees, few castles here and there, a few bridges, a cow. Yeah, let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Thanks for being here now. Hope to see you later. Bye.